Maylin adjusted the simple pearl earrings her grandmother had given her as she walked toward her small apartment bathroom. At 32, she looked younger than her years, with clear skin that rarely needed makeup and gentle eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Today was her birthday, and she'd decided to treat herself to dinner at a fancy new restaurant downtown. Her husband, Robert, had been away for nearly 2 weeks now. His business took him all over the world, often with little notice. She didn't mind too much. She had her kindergarten class to keep her busy, and she'd always been comfortable with her own company. Still, it would have been nice to celebrate together. Maybe next year, she whispered to herself, smoothing down the front of the navy blue dress she'd bought 3 years ago for her cousin's wedding. It wasn't designer, but it was well-made and classic. Maylin had always believed that quality mattered more than labels. She glanced around their modest 2-bedroom apartment. Most people would never guess that her husband was worth billions. Robert had started a tech company in his garage 12 years ago, and through a combination of innovation, perfect timing, and relentless work, he'd transformed it into a global enterprise. The business news channels called him a visionary. To Maylin, he was just Robert, the same kind-hearted man who brought her soup when she was sick and still forgot to put his dirty socks in the hamper. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Happy birthday, love. I'm so sorry I'm not there. The meetings are running long, but I'll make it up to you when I get back. Enjoy your dinner tonight. Love you," Maylin smiled, typing back. "Thank you. Missing you. Don't work too hard. Love you too." She slipped her phone into her small clutch purse and took one last look in the mirror. She'd never been one for flashy jewelry or designer clothes, even after marrying Robert. It wasn't that she couldn't afford these things. It was that she didn't want them. She'd grown up watching her parents work hard for everything they had, saving and being thoughtful with their money. Those values had stuck with her, even as her financial situation had dramatically changed. When she and Robert had married 5 years ago, they'd agreed that she would keep her job as a kindergarten teacher. She loved working with children, and the idea of giving that up just because she no longer needed to work seemed ridiculous to her. She'd also kept her maiden name professionally, partly because she'd already established herself as Ms. Wong at the school, and partly because she wanted to make her own way without riding on her husband's success. Most of her colleagues had no idea who her husband was. She preferred it that way. The few times people had found out, things had changed. They became awkward, treated her differently, asked for investments or donations. It was exhausting. Tonight's reservation at Riviera, the new French-Asian fusion restaurant everyone was talking about, had been made under Wong, not her married name of Chen. She'd made it a month ago, calling during her lunch break between teaching the kids about butterflies and helping little Joey with his shoelaces. The restaurant was supposed to be amazing, innovative cuisine, stunning city views, and a chef who'd trained under culinary legends in both Paris and Hong Kong. Getting a reservation had been nearly impossible, but one of the parents at her school worked in hospitality and had pulled some strings as a thank you after Maylin had spent extra time helping his daughter overcome her shyness. She grabbed her keys, the same keychain she'd had for years, with a little ceramic turtle her first class of kindergartners had given her, and headed out the door. She could have called a luxury car service, but instead, she walked to the corner and hailed a taxi. "Riviera, please," she told the driver, a middle-aged woman with brightly colored beads woven into her braids. "Ooh, fancy night out," the driver said, glancing at Maylin in the rearview mirror. "Special occasion?" "It's my birthday," Maylin admitted with a small smile. "Well, happy birthday to you. Going with friends?" "Just me, actually. My husband's away on business," the driver nodded knowingly. "Sometimes those solo celebrations are the best ones. No compromising on what you want to eat or when you want to leave." Maylin laughed. "That's true, though he's pretty easy to please food-wise." As the taxi wound through the evening traffic, Maylin gazed out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle on. She and Robert had discussed moving to a bigger place many times. He could certainly afford a penthouse or a mansion in the hills. But Maylin loved their cozy apartment. It was close to her school, walkable to her favorite bakery, and had a small balcony where she grew herbs and flowers. What more did they really need? Robert understood. That was one of the many reasons she loved him. He respected her choices even when they didn't align with what most people expected from someone in his position. He drove an electric car that was nice but not ostentatious, wore the same watch he'd had since college, and still got excited about finding good deals on everyday items. His money hasn't changed him, she'd once told her sister, who couldn't understand why they lived so modestly. Then what's the point of having it? Her sister had asked. The point, as Robert often said, was freedom and impact. They donated to causes they cared about, helped family members when needed, and had the security of knowing they could weather any financial storm. But they didn't need golden toilets or a fleet of sports cars to be happy. The taxi pulled up outside Riviera. The building was sleek and modern with a glass facade that reflected the city lights. A red carpet extended from the door to the street, and a uniformed doorman stood at attention. Here we are, the driver announced. That'll be $22.50. Mei Lin handed over $25. Keep the change. And thanks for the chat. Thank you. Enjoy your birthday dinner. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, Mei Lin felt a flutter of excitement. She rarely indulged in high-end dining, and tonight's tasting menu was supposed to be an experience to remember. She approached the doorman, who gave her a polite nod and opened the heavy glass door. The interior of Riviera was even more impressive than she'd imagined. The ceiling soared 2 stories high with a massive crystal chandelier that resembled a shower of stars. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while intimate tables were arranged to maximize both privacy and the spectacular vista. The air smelled of exotic spices and fresh flowers. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit stood at the host station. His hair was slicked back and he wore an expression of practiced charm that didn't quite reach his eyes. A small nameplate identified him as Dominic Beaumont, owner. Good evening, he greeted Mei Lin, his gaze quickly scanning her from head to toe. Something in his expression shifted slightly, a barely perceptible cooling. Do you have a reservation? Yes, under Wong, for 7:30. Dominic consulted the tablet in front of him, scrolling with one manicured finger. Ah, yes. Table for 1. He said it as if it were slightly pitiful. That's right, Mei Lin confirmed, refusing to feel embarrassed about dining alone. Follow me. Please. He led her through the restaurant, past tables of well-dressed diners sipping champagne and taking photos of artfully plated appetizers. Mei Lin noticed that many of the women wore designer dresses and flashy jewelry. Their handbags, casually placed on empty chairs or special hooks installed for that purpose, probably cost more than several months of her teacher's salary. She didn't feel underdressed. Exactly, her dress was appropriate for a nice restaurant, but she was definitely less adorned than most of the female patrons. No diamonds glittered at her throat or wrists, just her simple pearl earrings and the thin gold band on her ring finger. Dominic stopped at a table with a lovely view of the city lights. Your table, madam, he said, pulling out the chair for her. Thank you. This is beautiful, Mei Lin said, genuinely impressed by the panorama before her. Your server will be with you shortly to explain the tasting menu options. As Dominic walked away, Mei Lin took a deep breath and smiled to herself. This was going to be a wonderful birthday dinner. She only wished Robert could be here to share it with her. But she sent him a quick mental toast anyway. Little did she know that across the ocean, Robert was already on his way home, having cut his meetings short to surprise his wife for her birthday. And neither of them could have predicted how this evening at Riviera would soon take an unexpected turn, one that would remind them both about the dangers of judging people by appearances and the power of quiet dignity in the face of humiliation. Mei Lin opened the elegant leather-bound menu, her eyes widening slightly at the prices. She had expected it to be expensive, of course, but seeing the actual numbers gave her a moment's pause. Old habits died hard. Even knowing that she and Robert could afford it many times over, she still found herself mentally calculating how many school lunches she could buy for her kindergartners, with the cost of a single appetizer. A waiter approached her table, a young man with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Good evening, ma'am. My name is Theo, and I'll be your server tonight. Have you dined with us before? No, this is my first time, Mei Lin replied, returning his smile. Then welcome to Riviera. May I bring you something to drink while you look over the menu? Perhaps a glass of champagne to start? That sounds lovely, thank you. As Theo walked away, Mei Lin turned her attention back to the spectacular view. The city stretched out below her, a tapestry of lights against the darkening sky. She took out her phone and snapped a quick picture to send to Robert later. The champagne arrived promptly, served in a delicate flute that caught the light from the candle on her table. "Are you celebrating something special tonight?" Theo asked as he set it down. "Just my birthday," Mei Lin said. "Happy birthday." "Are you expecting anyone to join you?" "No, it's just me tonight. My husband is traveling for work." Theo nodded sympathetically. "Well, I'll make sure your birthday dinner is memorable. Our chef has prepared something exceptional for tonight's tasting menu." Mei Lin had just taken her first sip of champagne when she noticed Dominic, the owner, hurrying across the restaurant toward a table near the entrance. A couple had just been seated there. An older man in an expensive suit and a much younger woman dripping in jewels. The man was speaking loudly enough that his voice carried across the room. "Dominic, good to see you, old sport. I was beginning to think we wouldn't get in tonight." "Mr. Harrington, what a pleasure to have you with us this evening," Dominic gushed, his entire demeanor transformed from the cool professionalism he'd shown Mei Lin. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us tonight. I would have reserved our best table for you." The older man waved his hand dismissively. Last-minute decision. The wife wanted to try the place everyone's talking about. Dominic's eyes darted around the restaurant, landing briefly on Mei Lin's table before returning to the couple. "As it happens, I believe we can accommodate you at one of our premium tables. If you'll give me just a moment." Mei Lin watched with growing discomfort as Dominic made his way back to her table, his smile now strained and calculating. "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice noticeably less warm than it had been with Mr. Harrington. "I'm afraid there's been a slight issue with your table assignment." Mei Lin looked up at him, confused. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly," Dominic said with a tight smile. "But we have some VIP guests who have just arrived unexpectedly, and I'm afraid we need to make some adjustments to our seating arrangements. I'll need to relocate you to another table." Before Mei Lin could respond, Dominic was already signaling to a busboy. "Please gather the ladies' things. She'll be moving to table 14. "But I've already been served my champagne," Mei Lin said, trying to keep her voice even. "And I was told this was my table when I made the reservation a month ago." Dominic's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "I'm sure you understand that we must accommodate our regular patrons. Mr. Harrington is one of our most valued customers." The busboy arrived with an apologetic look, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but unwilling to contradict his boss. "This way, please," Dominic said, not waiting for Mei Lin's agreement. With as much dignity as she could muster, Mei Lin stood up and followed Dominic through the restaurant. She could feel curious eyes on her as they walked, and her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Instead of leading her to another table with a view, Dominic brought her to a small table tucked against the wall near the swinging doors to the kitchen. "Table 14, he announced, as if it were a desirable location and not clearly the worst table in the house. Mei Lin glanced around. The constant movement of servers in and out of the kitchen doors would ensure a steady stream of noise and disruption throughout her meal. The view from here was of nothing but other diners and the plain wall beside her. "I specifically requested a table with a view when I made my reservation," she said quietly. "It's my birthday and I was looking forward to the experience I was promised." Dominic's expression changed subtly, becoming more condescending. "I'm sure the kitchen table will be perfectly adequate for your own needs." His gaze flicked over her simple dress and unadorned wrists. "Perhaps the prices on our menu might be a bit beyond your means anyway. Our chef's tasting menu starts at $200 per person, not including wine pairings." The implication was clear. He thought she couldn't afford to dine there and was doing her a favor by relegating her to the worst table, where she could have a cheaper meal and be out of sight of his wealthier patrons. A few nearby diners had turned to watch the interaction, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with the slightly voyeuristic interest of people witnessing someone else's humiliation. Mei Lin felt a flash of anger, quickly followed by a deeper hurt. She could have told him right then who she was, that her husband could buy this entire restaurant with the equivalent of pocket change. She could have put him in his place with a few well-chosen words, but that wasn't who she was. She had never used Robert's wealth or status as a weapon, and she wasn't about to start now, even to defend herself from this man's rudeness. "I'm fully aware of your prices," she said calmly. "I made my reservation a month in advance and specified a table with a view. If you're unable to honor that reservation, I'd appreciate it if you'd simply say so directly instead of making assumptions about what I can or cannot afford. Dominic's face reddened slightly, but his smile remained fixed in place. I apologize if there's been a misunderstanding, but this is the only table available now. Perhaps you would be more comfortable at one of our sister restaurants downtown. The prices there are more accessible. A woman at a nearby table gasped quietly at the blatant insult. While her dining companion shook his head in disapproval, Theo, who had been following with Maylene's champagne, looked mortified. Sir, he began hesitantly, I believe there's still a table available by the east window. That's being held for the Winstons, who should be arriving any minute. Dominic cut him off sharply. Table 14 is the only option. He turned back to Maylene. So will you be staying with us this evening, or would you prefer I call you a taxi? The condescension in his voice was unmistakable now. Clearly he was hoping she would leave, freeing up even this undesirable table for someone he deemed more worthy. For a brief moment, Maylene considered walking out. Her birthday dinner was already ruined, but something in her refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her retreat. I'll stay, she said quietly, taking her seat at the small table. Thank you, Theo, she added as the young waiter set down her champagne with an apologetic look. Dominic gave a curt nod and walked away, already focusing his attention on greeting another well-dressed couple who had just entered the restaurant. I'm so sorry about this, ma'am, Theo whispered, looking genuinely distressed. This isn't how we normally treat our guests. It's not your fault, Maylene assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her champagne. As Theo left to attend to his other tables, Maylene took a deep breath and tried to compose herself. Her cheeks still burned with embarrassment, and she could feel occasional glances from nearby diners, some curious, some pitying. She took a sip of her champagne, finding that it had lost its flavor. What had started as a special birthday treat had turned into a humiliating experience. She briefly considered calling Robert, but what could he do from thousands of miles away? Besides, she had always handled her own problems and wasn't about to start running to her husband for rescue now. Just as she was, trying to decide whether to order food or simply pay for her champagne and leave, with her dignity intact, her phone buzzed with a message. Grateful for the distraction, she opened it to find a text from Robert. Landed early. Heading to surprise you. Where exactly at Riviera are you seated? Can't wait to see your face. Love you. Maylene stared at the screen in disbelief. Robert was here? In the city? Coming to the restaurant? A complex mix of emotions washed over her. Joy at the thought of seeing her husband. Relief that she wouldn't have to spend her birthday alone after all. And a growing sense of anticipation about what might happen when Robert Chen, tech billionaire and one of the richest men in the country, walked into Riviera and asked for his wife, the woman their owner had just publicly humiliated for being too poor to deserve a decent table. Maylene quickly texted back to Robert, I'm inside. They moved me to a table by the kitchen. She hesitated, then added, There's been a small issue with the seating. Don't worry about it. She didn't want to complain or make a scene. That wasn't her style, but her heart beat faster knowing Robert would be here soon. Outside the restaurant, Robert Chen stepped out of his taxi. Unlike his wife, he didn't mind occasionally indulging in luxury, though his tastes remained relatively modest for a man of his wealth. Tonight he wore a well-tailored dark gray suit, not flashy but unmistakably expensive to the trained eye. His watch, a birthday gift from Maylene last year, was his one true splurge item. It had cost her a month's teaching salary, and he treasured it more than the limited edition timepieces his executives often sported. He carried a small gift bag containing a bracelet he'd found in Hong Kong. Not diamonds or anything ostentatious, but a delicate jade piece from an artist whose work Maylene had admired during their trip there last year. The craftsman had remembered Robert when he'd returned alone this time, asking after the kind lady with the beautiful smile. Robert had commissioned this piece specially for her birthday. As he approached the entrance, the doorman straightened noticeably. Good evening, sir, the man said, opening the door with an extra flourish. Robert nodded politely. Thank you. The interior of Riviera was impressive, even to someone who had dined in some of the world's finest establishments. Robert appreciated, the architectural details and the careful lighting that highlighted both the space and the diners within it. He scanned the room, looking for Mei Lin but couldn't spot her near any of the windows. At the host stand, Dominic was speaking with a young couple, his manner pleasant but not particularly warm. Robert waited patiently until Dominic turned to him. "Good evening, sir," Dominic said, his professional smile in place. "Do you have a reservation with us tonight?" "I'm joining my wife," Robert replied. "She should be here already. Reservation under Wang?" Something flickered across Dominic's face, a momentary confusion. "Wang," he repeated, glancing down at his tablet. "Yes. She made the reservation about a month ago." Dominic scrolled through his system. "Ah, yes. The lady at table 14. His tone contained a hint of dismissal. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to her table." As they walked, Dominic stole glances at Robert, taking in his suit, his watch, his overall bearing. Something was registering in the owner's mind, some faint recognition, but he couldn't quite place it. Robert's face occasionally appeared in business publications, but he wasn't a celebrity or social media personality. He was known more by reputation than by sight. They approached the kitchen area, and Robert immediately spotted Mei Lin sitting alone at a small table against the wall. Even from a distance, he could tell she was uncomfortable. Her posture was too straight, her smile too fixed as she pretended to study the menu. Nearby diners were stealing glances at her, and now at him as he approached. Robert felt a twinge of protectiveness, wondering what exactly had happened before he arrived. "Here we are," Dominic announced, gesturing to the table as if it were a prime location and not clearly the worst spot in the house. Mei Lin looked up, her face transforming as she saw Robert. The tension in her shoulders visibly released and her smile became genuine. "Robert, you made it." She stood up to embrace him. "Happy birthday, love," Robert said, kissing her cheek and handing her the small gift bag. "I couldn't miss it." Dominic watched this interaction with growing interest. The man was clearly well off, based on his attire and demeanor. Had he made a mistake in his assessment of the woman? "I'll have another place setting brought over, right away," Dominic said, his tone noticeably warmer than it had been with Mei Lin earlier. "And perhaps sir would like to see our wine list?" "In a moment," Robert said, his attention focused entirely on his wife. "How are you? How's your birthday been so far?" Mei Lin hesitated. "It's better now that you're here." Something in her voice made Robert look more closely at her face. He knew his wife well enough to see the remnants of distress behind her smile. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "It's nothing," she said, but her eyes flicked briefly toward Dominic, who was still hovering nearby. Robert understood immediately. He'd seen this sort of thing before, people dismissing Mei Lin because she didn't flaunt wealth or status. It happened less often when he was with her, but he knew she encountered it on her own. "I see," he said simply. He turned to Dominic. "I understand my wife made a reservation for a table with a view. This doesn't seem to match that description." Dominic's smile tightened slightly. "I do apologize, sir, but we had some unexpected VIP guests this evening, and we needed to make some adjustments. I'm sure you understand." "Actually, I don't," Robert said pleasantly, but with an undercurrent of steel in his voice. "My wife made her reservation a month in advance. I'm curious what qualifies as a VIP in your establishment if confirmed reservations can be shuffled around at will." Dominic's smile froze. The nearby tables had gone quiet, diners pretending not to listen while catching every word. "Perhaps I could offer you complimentary champagne," Dominic suggested, as an apology for any inconvenience. Theo, the young waiter, approached with a second place setting, his expression carefully neutral though his eyes darted between his boss and the couple. "Thank you, Theo," Mei Lin said, remembering the server's name. This small gesture wasn't lost on Robert, who noted both his wife's innate kindness and the grateful look the young man gave her in return. "Sir," Theo said hesitantly to Dominic, "the Winstons just called to cancel their reservation. The table by the east window is available now." Dominic brightened. "Perfect. We can move you there immediately," he told Robert, ignoring Mei Lin completely now. It's one of our best tables. Robert exchanged a look with his wife. What do you think? Would you prefer the view? Maylin hesitated, then nodded. I would like to see the city lights. That was why I chose this restaurant. Very well, Robert said. We'll move to the window table. As they gathered their things, the couple at the table next to them, who had witnessed Maylin's earlier treatment, whispered to each other. The woman leaned over and quietly said to Maylin, "He was horribly rude to you earlier. I'm glad you're getting a proper table now." Maylin just smiled politely, neither confirming nor denying the observation. They followed Dominic to a beautifully positioned table with a stunning view of the city. As they settled in, Robert noticed several diners watching them with interest. Word of the earlier incident had clearly spread through the restaurant's gossip network. The chef's tasting menu comes highly recommended, Dominic said, his manner now obsequious as he handed Robert a wine list bound in soft leather. And our sommelier can suggest perfect pairings for each course. That sounds lovely, Robert replied, glancing at the wine list without much interest. He was more concerned with the tight lines around Maylin's eyes, the slight downturn at the corners of her mouth that told him she was still upset despite her calm exterior. I'll give you a moment to decide, Dominic said, backing away with a small bow. When they were alone, Robert reached across the table and took Maylin's hand. What happened? He asked again. Maylin sighed. It wasn't a big deal. He just made some assumptions about me. What kind of assumptions? That I couldn't afford to eat here, she said quietly. He suggested I might be more comfortable at one of their sister restaurants downtown, where the prices are more accessible. She mimicked Dominic's condescending tone. Robert's expression darkened. He said that to you? Directly? More or less. It was pretty clear what he meant. She squeezed his hand. Let's just enjoy our dinner, okay? I don't want to make a scene. You never do, Robert said with a soft smile. It's one of the things I love about you, but sometimes a scene is warranted. Theo approached with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. Compliments of the house, he said, setting them down carefully. In a lower voice, he added, I really am sorry about earlier, ma'am. Thank you, Theo, Maylin said warmly. When the waiter had gone, Robert studied his wife's face. You know, I was going to wait until after dinner, but maybe now is a good time. He nodded toward the small gift bag he'd given her earlier. Why? Don't you open your present? Maylin reached for the bag, her expression lightening with curiosity. She carefully removed the tissue paper and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside was the jade bracelet, its soft green stones catching the light. Oh, Robert, she breathed. It's beautiful. From that artist in Hong Kong that you liked, he explained. Wong Fa. He remembered you. I love it. She slipped it onto her wrist, admiring how it caught the light. Just then, Dominic returned to their table, accompanied by a tall, elegant woman in a chef's coat. Mr. Chen, Dominic said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard at nearby tables. I'd like to introduce our executive chef, Liliane Beaumont, my wife and the creative force behind Riviera. Robert looked up, surprised at being addressed by name. He hadn't introduced himself as Chen, only mentioned that his wife's reservation was under Wong. Maylin noticed it too, and her eyes met Robert's with a hint of amusement. Someone had clearly Googled him in the interim and made the connection. It's an honor to have you dining with us tonight, Mr. Chen, Liliane said, her French accent slight but noticeable. I would be delighted to prepare a special menu for you and Mrs. Chen this evening if you would permit me. Before Robert could correct her about Maylin's name, Dominic jumped in. We were distressed to learn about the confusion with your table earlier. Please accept our sincere apologies. Had we known you would be joining your wife, we would have made appropriate arrangements from the start. The implication was clear. Maylin alone hadn't warranted respect, but Robert's presence, or rather his wealth and status, changed everything. Robert's smile remained pleasant, but his eyes had cooled considerably. Thank you, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding that needs clearing up. Robert's voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable firmness to it as he looked directly at Dominic. First, my wife's name is Mei Lin Wong, not Mrs. Chen. She kept her family name, which I fully respect. Second, there shouldn't be different levels of service based on who you think someone is or what you assume they can afford. Dominic's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Of course, Mr. Chen, we value all our guests equally. Do you? Robert asked, his tone still pleasant but with an edge that made several nearby diners look up from their meals. Because from what I understand, my wife was moved from a table she reserved a month in advance, because someone you deemed more important arrived without a reservation. Then you seated her by the kitchen and suggested she might be more comfortable somewhere cheaper. The restaurant had grown noticeably quieter. Even those pretending not to listen were obviously hanging on every word. Liliane, the chef, looked genuinely distressed and turned to her husband. Dominic? Is this true? Dominic's face had reddened slightly. There was a simple misunderstanding about the tables. As for any comment about prices, I merely suggested that our sister restaurant might offer menu options with more variety. That's not what you said, came a voice from a nearby table. It was the woman who had spoken to Mei Lin earlier. You told her the prices here might be beyond her means and that she'd be more comfortable elsewhere. My husband and I heard you clearly. Dominic shot the woman a look of pure irritation before composing his features again. I apologize if my words were misconstrued. We certainly never intended— Please don't make this worse by being dishonest, Mei Lin interrupted gently. It was the first time she'd spoken since the confrontation began, and all eyes turned to her. I understand that appearances matter in your business. I came here in a dress that isn't designer, wearing no expensive jewelry and dining alone. You made assumptions and you treated me accordingly. She spoke without anger, just a simple statement of facts. Her calmness made the restaurant owner's behavior seem even more shameful by contrast. Robert watched his wife with quiet pride. This was the woman he had fallen in love with, dignified, honest, and kind even when others weren't kind to her. Liliane placed her hand on her husband's arm. We should offer Mr. Chen and Ms. Wong a private dining room for the remainder of their evening, she suggested, her eyes conveying a silent message to her husband that this situation needed immediate damage control. That won't be necessary, Robert said firmly. We're quite comfortable here now. He turned to the chef. We would love to try your tasting menu if that's still possible. Liliane nodded eagerly. Of course. It would be my pleasure to serve you both. I'll prepare everything personally. As the chef hurried back to the kitchen, Dominic lingered awkwardly at their table. Mr. Chen, I hope you understand that we cater to a certain clientele here. We need to make judgment calls about who deserves respect based on their appearance. Robert finished for him. That seems like a dangerous game in a city full of tech billionaires who wear hoodies and sneakers to board meetings. A few diners chuckled at this, and Dominic's discomfort visibly increased. I've been thinking about expanding my hospitality investments, Robert continued conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. There's a restaurant group looking for new backers, perhaps you've heard of them. Global Cuisine Ventures? Dominic paled slightly. Yes, of course. They own 15 of the top-rated restaurants on the coast. Including Riviera's main competitors went unsaid. 16 now, actually, Robert corrected. I just finalized the deal yesterday in Hong Kong. They're looking to acquire more single-location establishments with good bones, but, shall we say, room for improvement in their customer service philosophy. The implication hung in the air between them. Dominic swallowed hard. Mr. Chen, perhaps we could speak privately about— I think we've said all that needs saying. Robert interrupted smoothly. My wife and I would like to enjoy our dinner now. It is her birthday, after all. Dismissal didn't come more clearly than that. Dominic gave a stiff nod and retreated, making a beeline for what appeared to be his office at the back of the restaurant. When they were alone, Mei Lin reached across the table and squeezed Robert's hand. You didn't have to do that. Do what? He asked innocently. Threaten his business? I didn't threaten anything. I merely mentioned a business deal I actually did complete yesterday. Robert's eyes twinkled. The fact that it might give him a sleepless night or two is just a bonus. Mei Lin shook her head, but she was smiling. You're terrible. He deserved it, Robert said, his expression growing more serious. No one should be treated the way he treated you. I've dealt with worse, and that doesn't make it right. He studied her face. Does this happen often when I'm not with you? Maylin shrugged lightly.
Sometimes.
Usually it's small things. Salespeople ignoring me in luxury stores, maitre d's assuming I don't have a reservation at nice restaurants. Most people are kind, though, Robert frowned. You never mentioned this before. Because it doesn't matter, she said simply. What people think of me based on my appearance says more about them than it does about me. I don't need everyone to know I'm married to a wealthy man to feel worthy of basic respect. This was one of the countless reasons Robert loved her. In a world where so many people curated their lives for public display, frantically signaling their status and wealth, Maylin remained genuinely unconcerned with what strangers thought of her. Theo appeared with their first course. A delicate arrangement of seafood that looked like an artist's painting on the plate. Chef Liliane prepared this specially for you, he explained, describing the components with obvious pride. It looks wonderful, Maylin said sincerely. Ms. Wong, Theo said hesitantly after setting down the plates. I just wanted to say, many of us on the staff are very sorry about what happened earlier. Not everyone here shares Mr. Beaumont's priorities. Thank you, Theo, she replied warmly. And please call me Maylin. When the waiter had gone, Robert raised his champagne glass. To my beautiful wife on her birthday, the kindest, most genuine person I know. They clinked glasses and began to enjoy their meal. The food was exquisite, each course more impressive than the last. Liliane personally brought several dishes to their table, explaining her inspiration for each creation. Meanwhile, across the restaurant, whispers had spread about what had transpired. Diners were discreetly Googling Robert Chen on their phones, and the story was taking shape. Local tech billionaire's wife humiliated by restaurant owner who didn't recognize her. It had all the elements of a viral story waiting to happen. Mr. Harrington, the VIP who had unwittingly caused the initial problem by taking Maylin's table, approached as they were finishing their main course. Mr. Chen, he said with the confident familiarity of the very wealthy. Reed Harrington. I believe we met at the governor's charity gala last year. Robert stood politely to shake his hand, though his expression remained neutral. Yes, I recall. I just wanted to come over and apologize personally, Harrington continued, glancing at Maylin. I had no idea that our table had been promised to someone else, much less that it was your wife's birthday dinner. Had I known, I would never have accepted it. The fault isn't yours, Robert assured him. You had no way of knowing. Harrington nodded, then turned to Maylin. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry, Ms. Wong. I hope the remainder of your birthday is wonderful. Perhaps you'd allow me to send over a bottle of champagne for you both. That's very kind but not necessary, Maylin said with a genuine smile. We have more than enough to celebrate already. After Harrington returned to his table, Robert shook his head slightly. You're too forgiving. He wasn't the one who was rude to me, Maylin pointed out. And he did come to apologize. Only after finding out who I am, Robert said dryly. Maybe, she conceded. But people can only start from where they are. If tonight makes him think twice before accepting someone else's table in the future, that's progress. This philosophical outlook was so typically Maylin that Robert had to laugh. Always seeing the best in people. Not always, she corrected him, her eyes following Dominic as he emerged from his office looking harried. But I try. As the evening continued, they noticed Dominic making his way around the restaurant, stopping at select tables to speak quietly with certain diners. He seemed to be doing damage control, perhaps concerned about the story spreading. He's worried about his reputation, Robert observed. Wouldn't you be? Maylin asked. If I had behaved the way he did? Absolutely. But I'd be more worried about making actual changes than just spinning the story. The dessert arrived, a stunning creation of chocolate and fruit that Liliane had designed to look like a blooming flower. For the birthday girl, she announced proudly. And I insist this is on the house. All of it. That's not necessary, Robert began, but the chef raised her hand. Please. It would mean a lot to me. I am not happy with how things were handled tonight. After she left, Maylin sampled the dessert and closed her eyes in appreciation. This almost makes up for everything else. Robert watched his wife, her face glowing in the candlelight, and felt a surge of love for this woman who had never needed his wealth or status to be extraordinary. By the time Robert and Maylin left Riviera, the evening had transformed from a disaster into something memorable, though not in the way either of them had expected. As they stepped outside, the cool night air was refreshing after the tense atmosphere of the restaurant. "I'm sorry your birthday dinner turned into such a drama," Robert said, taking his wife's hand as they waited for their car. Mei Lin leaned against his shoulder. "Actually, I think I'll remember this birthday for a long time. Not many dinners end up being quite so educational." "Educational?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "For Dominic," she clarified with a small smile. "And maybe for a few of the other diners, too." As their car arrived, neither of them noticed a woman at a nearby table taking a photo of them through the restaurant window, nor did they see her fingers moving rapidly over her phone's keyboard moments later. By the next morning, their evening at Riviera had become the talk of the city's social media circles. Someone had posted a detailed account of what had happened, complete with a discreet photo of the couple leaving the restaurant. The post was being shared widely, with comments ranging from outrage at Dominic's behavior to admiration for Mei Lin's dignity under pressure. Mei Lin first heard about it when she arrived at her kindergarten classroom. The school secretary, Vivian, greeted her with wide eyes and a tablet in hand. "Have you seen this?" Vivian asked, turning the screen toward Mei Lin. "It's all over the local news sites this morning. Tech billionaire's wife humiliated by elite restaurant owner. There are thousands of comments." Mei Lin stared at the screen in dismay. There was the photo of her and Robert leaving Riviera, her face partially visible despite the photographer's apparent attempt to be discreet. The article beneath detailed the entire incident, though some parts had been exaggerated or misrepresented. "Oh no," she murmured. This was exactly the kind of attention she had always worked to avoid. "I had no idea you were married to Robert Chen," Vivian continued, her voice a mix of awe and hurt. "You've never mentioned it once in the 3 years you've worked here." "It wasn't relevant to my job," Mei Lin said simply, handing back the tablet. "And I'd appreciate if we could keep it that way. The children don't need to know, and neither do the parents." Vivian looked disappointed but nodded. "Of course. But you should know that Principal Goldstein has already received calls from 2 news outlets asking for comments about our teacher who's married to a billionaire." Mei Lin closed her eyes briefly. This was going to be complicated. Meanwhile, across town, Robert was dealing with the fallout in his own way. His assistant, Priya, had compiled a media summary and placed it on his desk first thing that morning. "The story's gaining traction," she informed him. "Riviera's Yelp page is being flooded with negative reviews from people who weren't even there. Their PR team has released a statement apologizing for the misunderstanding and claiming they value all their guests equally." Robert skimmed the statement on his tablet. "Pretty weak," he commented. "No specific acknowledgement of what actually happened." "There's more," Priya continued. "Global Cuisine Ventures has issued a press release announcing they're putting their planned acquisition talks with Riviera on hold, pending an internal review of their service practices." This caught Robert's attention. He hadn't actually mentioned Riviera specifically to the restaurant group, but someone had obviously connected the dots after the story broke. "I should call Winston at Global," he mused. "I don't want anyone's livelihood at stake over this. The servers and kitchen staff shouldn't suffer because their boss is a snob." As the day progressed, the story continued to spread. By lunchtime, Mei Lin had received texts from her sister, 2 cousins, and several friends she hadn't spoken to in months, all asking if she was okay and expressing outrage on her behalf. During her lunch break, she called Robert. "This is getting out of hand," she said without preamble. "One of the parents stopped me in the hallway to tell me that her husband works for a competing restaurant group, and they're planning to use this whole thing in their marketing somehow. And 3 reporters have called the school office." Robert sighed. "I know, I've had calls too. I'm sorry this has blown up. I never should have confronted Dominic so publicly." "It's not your fault," Mei Lin assured him. "You stood up for me and I love you for that. But now I need to figure out how to make this go away before my whole classroom hears about it. I don't want to be the billionaire's wife to these kids. I'm just Ms. Wong, their kindergarten teacher." "I understand," Robert said. "Let me think about how we can redirect this attention." That evening, Mei Lin arrived home to find Robert waiting with takeout from their favorite local Chinese restaurant. The small, family-owned place where they'd had their first date 6 years ago. The owners still didn't know who Robert was. They just knew the couple as regulars who appreciated authentic cooking. "I thought we deserved a quiet night in after all this," Robert explained, setting out the containers on their small dining table. As they ate, they discussed how to handle the situation, Halfway through the meal, Robert's phone buzzed with a text. He read it and let out a surprised laugh. "What is it?" Maylin asked. "It's from Liliane Beaumont, the chef at Riviera. Apparently, she's left her husband." Maylin nearly choked on her dumpling. "What? How did she even get your number?" "Through Winston at Global Cuisine, I assume." Robert showed her the message. "Mr. Chen, this is Liliane Beaumont. I wanted to apologize again for your experience at Riviera. I've left both the restaurant and my husband. His behavior that night was the final straw in a pattern I can no longer ignore. If you're still interested in restaurant investments, I have a business proposal I'd like to discuss." "Wow," Maylin said softly. "I didn't expect that." "Me neither," Robert admitted. "What do you think?" Maylin considered for a moment. Her food was extraordinary, and she seemed genuinely disturbed by how we were treated. "So I should meet with her?" "I think you should, and I have an idea about how we might turn this whole situation around." 2 months later, a new restaurant opened in the space formerly occupied by a struggling cafe near Maylin's school. Called Pearls, it was an elegant but unpretentious establishment with a simple concept. Exceptional food served with genuine hospitality to everyone, regardless of appearance or status. The executive chef was Liliane Beaumont, now professionally known by her maiden name, Liliane Moreau. The primary investor was a new hospitality group founded by Robert Chen, with a focus on ethical business practices, fair wages for restaurant workers, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory treatment of customers or staff. On opening night, Maylin and Robert arrived without fanfare and were seated at a corner table with a lovely view of the open kitchen. They watched as Theo, now Pearl's head waiter, welcomed guests with the same warm professionalism he had shown even during the uncomfortable evening at Riviera. "He's good," Robert observed. "Hiring him was a smart move," Liliane insisted, Maylin said. "Apparently he stood up to Dominic after we left that night, telling him his behavior had been shameful. He was fired on the spot." Their meal was everything they had hoped, innovative yet comforting, presented beautifully but without unnecessary pretension. When Liliane emerged from the kitchen to greet them, her face was flushed with the excitement of a successful first service. "What do you think?" she asked anxiously. "It's perfect," Maylin told her sincerely. "Exactly what we envisioned." As for Riviera, its fortunes had taken a sharp downturn following what local food critics now referred to simply as the incident. Global Cuisine Ventures had ultimately decided against the acquisition. Several longtime staff members had departed for other opportunities, many of them finding positions at Pearls or other restaurants within Robert's new hospitality group. Dominic Beaumont had issued a more comprehensive public apology 2 weeks after the incident, but the damage to his reputation had been done. The restaurant remained open but was struggling to fill tables despite a revamped menu and heavily advertised commitment to equitable service. "Do you ever feel guilty about what happened to him?" Robert asked Maylin as they finished their dessert at Pearls. She considered the question thoughtfully. "I feel sad for him," she said finally. "Not because his business is suffering, but because he values the wrong things. He judged me for not looking rich enough to eat at his restaurant. Now people are judging him for how he treated me. There's a lesson in there somewhere." "You're too wise for me," Robert said with a smile. "Not wise," she corrected, "just observant. My kindergartners taught me that everyone wants the same basic things: to be seen, to be valued, and to be treated with kindness. Dominic forgot that, and now he's learning it the hard way." As they left Pearls that evening, several diners recognized them, but no one approached or made a scene. The story had run its course in the media, and they were gradually returning to their normal lives, albeit with some changes. Maylin was still teaching kindergarten, still driving her modest car, and still shopping at regular stores. The only difference was that her students now occasionally asked innocent questions about why her picture had been in the newspaper. She always gave the same answer. Sometimes grown-ups forget their manners, and it's important to remember that how much money someone has doesn't make them more or less deserving of respect. It was a lesson she hoped would stay with her students long after they left her classroom, perhaps even longer, than their lessons about butterflies or how to tie their shoes. And somewhere across town, she suspected Dominic Beaumont was finally learning it too.